Did I get you?
Yeah.
Hey guys, welcome to Rotor Riot. My name is Drew, and we are going to be doing a build today. We're going to be building something like this. So we're going to take all this and turn it into this thing. The quad that we're going to be putting together is identical to the quad that I fly most on a daily basis. I play with a few other things, and the components we're using here are what I keep coming back to. Performs well, and it's durable. I like to fly a lot of concrete stuff in Detroit, so bashing the quad around, these take it, and so this is the stuff that I recommend. This build is based around the MQC Fusion airframe. It's gonna use a bunch of DYS components and some cool 3D printed accessories that make for a really clean construction. This is the frame that I like. It's the Mini Quad Club Fusion. So first step is let's just get this thing assembled, and then we'll start adding parts to it. It's a bottom plate, arms attached to the underside of it, and then this is a piece that I like to use. You don't need to use this. What you do is press fit the nuts into this plastic bit that's 3D printed, and then the bolts thread up through the arm into the nut, and that way once you've stacked all your other components on top, you can still remove arms just by dropping the screws out without having to remove all your components. You don't have to use this, but I like it, so let's drop all these in here. These 4 outer holes are where your flight controller is going to bolt in. So we'll leave those empty for now. There are 2 sizes of screws that come with this kit, essentially a long one and a short one. And the short screws are for attaching the arms to the body. The long screws will be used to attach the standoffs in between the top and the bottom plate, as well as for the flight controller. So I just start with the outermost bolt hole of the arms, drop the thread through, line up the arm. It's a little awkward when you're just getting all the arms started. So over tighten these here, so I gotta back these out a little bit so there's some more wiggle room, because the arms do lock together. So you just go around getting all the arms loosely attached. 3 bolts for each arm. Just got the last one to do. I'm just loosely snugging up the bolts on all the arms because, as you can see, they do interlock. So you want to get everything in place before you go through and torque everything down. All the arms are attached, and now I'm just going to go around and make sure everything is tightened up. Now that we've got the bottom of the frame all assembled, we're going to start at the center and work our way out. We're going to be building around the DYS F4 flight controller. Previously in my builds, I tended to use a separate power distribution board and flight controller. But what's great about this thing, it is both a PDB, a flight controller, and an OSD all in one. There's some real weight to this. You can direct solder everything, and all your work can be on top of it. You're not gonna block anything under that you're gonna need to get to. Directly solder to this, and it makes for a really clean package. Another great thing cool about this board is that there is integrated soft mounting. You get these small rubber bits that go in these extra large holes. So you insert these rubber bits in here. Takes some fiddling to get right, but they'll pop in. They do give you some extras, which is nice because you will almost certainly drop one as you struggle to get these little things. Get in there. All right, we're all set. Now, DYS does provide nylon standoffs. 2 things with this. One, if you use the plastic piece that I like to hold the nuts, they are not tall enough. And the other thing that I found with nylon standoffs in general, if you crash, and I do, the bolts tend to rip out of the nylon. So something that I found to be more durable than nylon standoffs are these rubber standoffs. They actually have metal threaded inserts. This provides for some additional soft mounting of the flight controller. So yeah, we got soft mount on soft mount, all the soft mounts, all the things. None of the vibrations are gonna make it to your flight controller, and you're just gonna have a real ripping experience, or whatever. So poke a short screw up through the frame, thread on your rubber standoffs, and now we're going to drop the flight controller onto the standoffs. You might find on the bottom of this flight controller some pins sticking downward. That would be used if you were using the 4-in-1, which I don't like to do. And that does just clear the bottom piece. But to ensure that everything clears all right, we're just gonna go ahead and cut them off. Unless you think you're ever gonna use a 4-in-1, then don't just go hacking away at components. You can leave it on, but yeah. Now this frame is the same front to back, so you don't have to worry about front to back orientation, but do keep left and right in mind. So I prefer to have the pads for the battery in the back, and we'll just choose this to be the back. Grab the nylon screws that they gave you and thread them into the rubberized standoffs. We'll just do 2 for now to hold it in place in case we need to pull it up for any reason. Now we're gonna grab the ESCs. This is a quadcopter, so you have 4 of them. DYS 30 amp ESCs. They are D-shot capable. They come with a cool little plastic cover that fits the width of the arm very nicely. So let's get these ESCs soldered up to the heart of the build. We're gonna pre-tin all the pads for which we'll use to attach the ESCs. So we've got positives and negatives at each corner, as well as smaller pads right behind the larger ones for the signal wires. Don't burn the rubber. Go around and get the other 3 corners looking like this. We've got all 4 corners of the flight controller pre-tinned to accept our ESC leads. For these holes here, standoffs will go between your top and bottom plates. So we're going to hold the ESC roughly in place on the arm where it will sit, and then route the wires in between the standoffs holding the flight controller and the longer standoffs. You can just kind of hold with your finger the length that they need to be and cut them. Just leave a little extra length to be sure. It's easier to cut than uncut. And now we'll pre-tin our wires. Pay close attention to the markings on the board for positive and negative. Black is negative, red is positive. When soldering, it's good to have patience. Do not blow on your solder joints like that. That's not the right thing to do, but I'm a rebel. Just like we did for the power and ground, gonna line up and trim these signal wires. Ow! Take pleasure in the pain you cause your drone components. A lot of smoke. I think this is a little too high. Well, let's see, we are at 65. I don't know what that means. That's exactly where you should set your soldering iron. I did it backwards. That's so funny. You know, here's what I've done here. I did intentionally to show you what not to do. This was all intentional on my part. What you do not want to do is solder the white, which is the signal wire, to the ground of the signal pads. That is not what you want to do. Now that I've done that totally on purpose and for a good example, we're going to undo it. The markings are a little bit harder to see for the signal wires. The pads are labeled M1, and that means for motor 1, and minus, and that's for the ground. So attach the white wire to whichever M number you're doing for that corner, and the black wire to the minus. Now if you're having trouble holding the wire in place with your fingers and you're worried about getting burned, what you want to do is grab yourself a hobby knife and stab. You can use the dull end of the blade to hold your wire in place like so. Look at that. And we're just gonna go around and do the same process for the other 3 ESCs. So when attaching your wire, which we've pre-tinned, to your pad, which we've pre-tinned, just hold the wire on top of the pad, apply heat to the wire. You're gonna see the solder on the wire get wet before the solder on the pad. And if you don't wait long enough, you'll get a cold solder joint. The heat had not flowed through the joint all the way, and you can see where there's a line between the solder on the pad and the solder on the wire. Hold it on there a little bit longer so that the solder on the 2 parts flow together. And now we've got ourselves a nice congruous solder joint. Alright, we have finished soldering all 4 ESCs to the flight controller. We're going to keep moving outward and attach the motors to the pads on the ESCs. These motors are the best because they are purple and they say fire, so you know they're hot. We've got our DYS fire motor. Durable, performs well. Probably my favorite go-to motor. Comes with some screws, some nuts to hold your props on. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna take 1 screw and loosely thread it onto the arm so that the motor is kind of in place on where it will be at the end of the arm, and that's going to help us get the wires cut to the right length. So again, it's better to err on like the side of them being a little extra long in case you need to adjust something. So hold your ESC close to the body, move the wires into place over the ESC, give them a good old cut. Ow. Strip off a little bit of the ends, approximately 1 measurement unit, and pre-tin the ends of the wires, and also get some solder on these ESC pads. We're going to spread the left and right wires apart so we can start with the middle. So in the past, you had to usually cross 2 of the wires to get the motor direction correct, but it actually doesn't matter anymore because with the new versions of BL Heli, you can go in and reverse motor direction in the firmware. So just go willy-nilly, attach whatever, but if you want to make it look nice, just have the wires run flat across the arm. Hold your ESC in place, hold the wire down on the solder pad, And what you can do is just kind of wet it, just get it to be held in place. That is not a clean solder joint, but it's in place. Do that for the other two. So we're just kind of wetting it, getting it to kind of stick in place. And now with them in place, go back with your knife and you can hold them down better and everything will stay lined up for you. And now we see the solder flowed through the wire and the pad. That's a good strong solder joint. See, that one was bad. And just repeat for the other 4 motors. You shouldn't just rip the skin off the wire. You should use these little tools and get all up in there. And oh yeah, look at that, look at that. That's why I don't do this. It doesn't always there. There we go. Boom. So much better. Your quad is gonna have 10 more horsepower because you used wire strippers and took your time. Focus pull. Oh my god. Yes. Yes. What do you do for audio for some of these parts? Do you use music?
Yeah.
Alright, we have got all 4 propulsion generators adhered to the vehicular framesicle. We're going to start attaching your FPV gear, which consists mainly of a camera and a video transmitter. This right here is a Rotor Riot Edition Swift. What's special about this is it's got a skull on the camera, so you know it means business. No, but it does actually come with a really great lens that's more similar to the GoPro that you film with, so you'll have a wider field of view while you're flying, helps to see things better, and frame up your shot. I mean, so the view that you get out of this while you're flying is gonna be a lot more similar to what you're actually recording on the GoPro. They give you a programming cord, but hey, you don't need it because the Rotor Riot Swift comes pre-programmed with the best possible camera settings, but you should hold on to it in case you want to change it. So just set that aside. Ding. We've got our camera lead here. Power, ground, video. Let's get that twisted up to get things nice and clean. Again, we want to have these pads on the rear of the craft, so your camera's going to go in the front up here. So you can kind of loosely measure out how long the wire is going to have to be to get over here. Just cut that. Now, here's where the really well-marked aspect of this board comes to an end. There was no confusion when attaching the power, ground, and signal for your ESC, but now it's time to do the FPV gear, and you know it needs to go in some of these pinholes. Where the hell's it go? It's not marked anywhere. We're gonna turn to our old friend, Mr. Google. Alright, I've pulled up on Google a wiring diagram for the board. We're going to use this to make sure that we put all the wires in the right place. In the future, DYS should be including a diagram so you don't have to search for something, but always consult the included diagram or the most up-to-date thing that you can find on the interwebs, because sometimes pinholes do get reassigned from revision to revision, so double check where you're attaching everything. We've got our camera lead prepped to be soldered to the board. Now what you can do to make this cleaner is route the wires under the board and attach them to the underside. I don't like to do that because I always build things with serviceability in mind. So by just simply attaching the wires to the top of the board, if you need to make any repairs, well, I guess I should say when you have to make some repairs, you can just pull off the top plate and get to everything nicely without having to pull off 2 of the motors and open up the whole underside. So just attach things to the top to keep it simple, or if you want to get fancy, you can route things under and do it like that. So the video signal for your FPV system is going to be routed through this board because it does have built-in OSD. So something you have to be careful about, again, check the wiring diagram and double check it, is which is video in and which is video out. Video in is for the camera and video out is going to the video transmitter. This is the video in port right there. Got some solder on that. This is ground over here. We've got our ground pre-tinned here, and this camera can run off between 5 and 17 volts. So we're going to use the 5-volt regulator in this board to give it a nice clean power source. So this center pin between the video and the ground is 5 volts. And now we can go ahead and attach our harness that we cut, stripped, and pre-tinned. We are attaching our red wire to the 5-volt output right here. We're attaching our black wire to one of the ground pins along this rail, and we are attaching the yellow wire to the video in, because video is coming from the camera going into the board and OSD system. And now that lead will plug into our camera up here in a little bit. Let's attach the lead for the video transmitter. This is a Tramp by Immersion RC. This is one of a few video transmitters that, when used with this board, you can access a bunch of features through OSD. So you're going to be able to switch your video channel and change your power output all through the OSD in your goggles. With the Tramp, you get a few different harnesses. This one is great to plug a battery directly into, and then this could plug into your run cam actually, but we're not going to use this one. This one is a pigtail that has all the wires available to us, which is nice because we are going to be using an additional wire so that we can enable some features using Betaflight. So this harness is going to plug into your Tramp here, and they've got all the pins labeled. So we've got positive, ground, 5 volts that you could use to power your camera, but we don't need that because we're going to power it off the 5 volts coming from the flight controller. We've got our video signal, and we've got T for telemetry. We are going to use that wire, and then A for audio. Unless you want to hook up a microphone, we're not going to use that. So we can actually remove the 2 wires we won't be using, which is the 5 volt and the A wire. So that's the third one in and the last one, which is orange and green. You can just cut it, but it's a little cleaner if you just lift up this plastic retaining piece and pull the wire right out. Our Tramp is going to sit in the rear of the quad, roughly about here, just to kind of roughly measure the harness length. That's going to plug in back here, and then these wires have to get up to this group of pins. So just get it about right. You can always go back and shorten things up if you're OCD. 2 black wires, and we'll just twist them together because, why not? Consulting our wiring diagram. Thank you, Mr. Google. Let's start with ground. Down here we've got another ground pin. We'll attach our ground wire/wires. We're not going to run this Tramp off 5 volts. It needs at least 2S power, which is like 7 volts. So it can handle up to 4S batteries. So we have a filtered battery power output right here. So this will give us a clean voltage from the battery that we can power our Tramp off of. We attached our ground. We skipped over to the 5 volt pad, put the power here, and then we're going to attach our video to the video out pad there. Now this last white wire is the telemetry wire, and you're going to use that to control your video transmitter through the Betaflight OSD. In this group of pads, we do have access to a UART 6. There's a transmitter and a receiver pin. You want to hook this wire up to the transmitter pin because you are transmitting from this board a signal to this video transmitter. All right, we've got our camera lead. We've got our video transmitter lead. Let's get our receiver. This is a Spectrum SPM 4649T serial telemetry receiver created with the Mini Quadist in mind. Your command receiver is going to sit next to the video transmitter back here. So what we need to do, make a harness out of the wires that they include. This harness plugs into your receiver, gives you a port for programming and binding here, and then this attaches to your flight controller. You can either cut this off, directly solder it, you could solder on some pin headers in a way that it'll plug in, or you can do what we are going to do, and we're just gonna cut the connector we need, extend the wires, and directly solder it to the flight board. Damage is done. We've also got a harness for battery power that plugs into your transmitter as well. And this is for sending the battery voltage back to your transmitter via telemetry so that you could have alarms and stuff for that. I'm not going to use this for this build because the OSD is going to give us a visual on battery voltage, so we're going to set that aside, but you can use that if you want to have additional capability in your transmitter to check on your battery voltage. Actually, we'll just take the wires that are left over from the camera lead that we cut and extend the wires that we need for our receiver. So red to red, black to black, and colored to colored, so yellow and blue. I prefer lighters. Okay, we've got the harness for the receiver extended. Our receiver sits back here, and we're gonna solder wires to these pins over here. So we're making things roughly the right length. We're going to attach the ground wire for the receiver to one of the ground pins. This receiver runs on between 4 and 8 volts, so we're gonna grab power from one of the 5 volt pads over here. There we go. Now in this row, you've got access to some more UARTs. You've got UART 3 over here, and you've got S-Bus or UART 1 over here. So we're just gonna grab the receiver pad for UART 3 to hook up our Spectrum receiver. You can use the S-Bus or UART 1 receiver as well, but we'll just use UART 3. So we've got all these harnesses ready to receive our camera and our video transmitter and our receiver, and the last thing that we need to attach to our flight board is a lead to plug in the battery. Came with the flight board. Here it is. It's nice. It's got like plastic bits. It's all sorts of good. So we will pre-tin our battery leads, which again, on the back of the craft. I tend to be wary of solder that comes from the factory, so they pre-tin these for you, but we're just gonna snip that off. Turn up the heat just a little bit for this larger stuff. Now it's set to slightly higher than what it was before. Exactly that, nothing more, nothing less. This can take a while to tin this larger gauge wire, so patience is always the thing. Now we know for sure that the solder on the wire matches the solder on the pads. Let's get this attached. We've got these pads labeled B+. That does not stand for black, it stands for battery positive, which is red. B+ is red, G is black. Looks messy, but it's coming together nicely. Let's get our standoffs in place. With every mini quad club frame, you get these nice, sexy red standoffs. I like purple better. I got my own secret stash to match the motors. We used all the long screws to attach the arms. We're just left over with some of these shorter screws that came in the kit. Okay, we've got the front to back, the first 6 standoffs attached. We're gonna hold off on the back ones for a second. You'll see why in a minute. We've got our Swift, and we've got camera plates. The cool thing about these camera plates, they've got these little swoops cut in here that line up with the additional mounting hole on your Swift to lock that sucker into position. So there's all them screws for that Swiftsicle. Got these little teeny screws here. That's gonna thread into the plastic holes on the side of the camera. We use this washer to get things a little extra snug. Pop it through that hole, and now just get it snugged up. You don't have to get these super tight because you do have this additional mounting hole to lock in your camera angle, but just get it pretty snugged up. Again, for the other side. Now we grab these slightly longer screws that will thread into the metal insert in the back of the camera. That will help us keep our camera angle set. Just snug it up so it doesn't flop around, but later, once the camera's installed, you can dial in your camera angle and then tighten that up all the way to lock it into what you like to fly. Personally, I fly almost always with about 30 degrees of camera tilt. Maybe if I'm doing something extra like backwards, I'll turn it up a bit, or if there's lots of proximity stuff involved, I'll turn it down a bit. But 30 is a nice, in between, gives you the best of both worlds. We'll just get it in here now and we'll dial in my angle once the camera and the quad are more assembled. The camera plates have been loosely attached to the camera. We've got our camera harness that plugs into the 3-pin plug top of the camera. Again, the plugs are the top of the camera, so don't install your camera upside down. And then these camera plates will just drop into these slots that are cut right there. Our camera is set in place there, and when we install the top plate, we'll lock it in. Let's move on to the components that go in the back. What we've got is this really cool 3D printed piece called the ComDock. Like I showed you earlier, where the receiver and the transmitter are gonna be held back here, we're gonna use this piece to hold them in place and give you a good mounting location. So take this nut and washer off of the SMA extension, and this piece has holes to mount your SMA and also holes to hold your receiver antennas in place. So this is an optional accessory. You can mount your transmitter and your receiver directly to the plates however you see fit. This top plate does have a hole to which you could install your SMA extension, but this accessory really does clean things up nicely, so we're going to use it here. Put your extension through one of the holes, figure out exactly how it's going to sit. We will hold that in place with a zip tie, but first we'll get the receiver attached to the other side. There we go. The antennas just go through the holes there. We'll get some antenna tubes in a minute. Let's hold both these things down with some double-sided tape and then reinforce it with a zip tie. Got ourselves a nice big ol' overkill zip tie. Kapow! We skipped the last 2 standoffs on the back. Get those and they insert into this piece. Everything that gets your thing in the air, talking to your stuff on the ground, in a nice neat little package. Let's get it plugged in here. We'll pull our battery connector up and out of the way. Insert the bottom of the ComDock into the slot on the bottom of the frame. And then the screws will thread into the standoffs that we inserted into the comm dock. Forgot we need to add the washer and this nut onto our SMA extension just to keep everything nice and neatly locked into place. All of our guts are in place. Here's where you can check if everything's lining up. Our receiver wires are a little long. Like I said, I err on the side of length. I mean, the camera wires can tuck in here. But actually, while we've got it open, I'm going to shorten up the receiver wires just to get it a bit cleaner. All right, so if you're doing any repairs, just apply some heat to remove your wires. We will shorten it to about there. You still want to have some slack as things get, moved and jostled around. Also, anytime you're tinning your wires, don't do what I almost just did, which is do it with them hanging over your sensitive electronics. You don't want any solder dripping down that you may not see and damaging components. All the wires are pre-tinned and we can reattach them. Yeah, that looks a lot cleaner. Don't have so much unnecessary wire. Things are looking good. All that's really left to do is tighten all the nuts and bolts. Earlier we only put 2 in the flight controller. Don't forget to add the other 2. You want to compress the rubber insert, but not overly so. Just get it to squish down a little bit. That's pretty good. So we've got the flight board all tightened down. Everything looks connected properly. Oh, there is included with the Tramp this additional piece that allows for some features catered to racers. So you could mount that somewhere and attach it with this harness. There's room that you could slip it in with the comm dock or hook it up to the underside, but I don't need it. I'm just going to freestyle and rip around some bandos. So all the components are in here that we need. Got our top plate. Let's get it lined up. Again, the camera plates insert into these side slots. And let's just start with the back here. Before we go ahead and put the 4 bolts in the front hole, we're going to grab this GoPro mount. This is another accessory to hold your GoPro up at an angle for getting footage while you're flying in lots of cool places. I actually designed this. It's got my name on the back, offers some protection for the GoPro, and you just drop the screws through the holes and it attaches like that. One thing I definitely recommend doing is adding washers to the screws that you use in the GoPro mount. That'll just add an extra layer of protection from the mount getting pulled up over through the screws. So if you're having trouble getting the threads to line up, just go back and loosen one of the bolts on the bottom to give the standoff some wiggle room, and then things should line up a bit more nicely. Let's get everything snugged up. It's looking pretty good. The old shake test. That's right, we haven't tightened down the motors yet because we only put 1 bolt in before, so let's go back, find those motor bolts. It's not uncommon to only use 2 motor bolts, but I recommend against it. I think using all 4 makes things a lot sturdier. It's less likely that the screws are going to come loose and that your motor is going to fall off. And also, in the very likely event of a crash, the base of your motor is less prone to getting bent out of shape. So you don't get bent out of shape by breaking things. Okay, we've got all the screws tightened up, except for this one that I missed. Double and triple check your work. Take your time. Don't be a drill. All the hardware has been tightened up. No more loose motors. Let's just add a couple finishing touches. With the ESCs, we've got these cool covers that I mentioned, so those can just slip right on. Get all these wires lined up in the slots in the plastic, and then snap it shut. Covers are all in place. You want to hold them down to the arm some way. You can use double-sided tape on the bottom of the ESC covers, but what I've found to be the most secure and easy to repeat in the field is just some electrical tape wrapped around. These covers offer a little bit of protection against your propellers getting bent in the scraggle, so you're not going to have your props smacking your ESC. We've got our ESCs protected. Let's cover up these antennas too. We've just got some antenna tube here. Get a rough measurement. That just inserts over your antenna and into the back of the accessory, again for the bottom. Lastly, we've got our video transmitter antenna. It just screws on back there. We can bend it into whatever angle we want to have it at. And I've got 2 battery straps. I definitely recommend using both of them. It'll prevent your battery from flopping around and causing any weird behavior with your drone when you're doing acrobatic moves, and it's also less likely to get ejected in a really hard crash. So just got our front strap there. The rear strap passes right over the top of the comm dock accessory. Got a battery that's in very good condition. I take very good care of my batteries. And we'll grab this pigtail and use the rear strap to hold it in place. And then the battery just loops around and plugs in there. Last thing we need a GoPro for this. GoPro just inserts into the side, press fits, and you are ready to fly. We've got our invisible props. Just kidding, we've got pink props. This whole build is looking really good in pink and purple. We're just gonna finger tighten these. And with that, the physical part of your build is done. I think it's looking really good in all purple. I am so psyched to fly this thing. If you enjoyed this build video, check the description for a link to a configuration video where I'll walk you through all the steps to actually getting this set up so you can fly it. Let us know in the comments how your build goes. If you have any questions, drop those. We'll do our best to answer them for you. And yeah, we'll see you next time. You even told me exactly what to say. You can't script me. You can't script me here. This isn't.
Your backup, that's great.
How doth we drone?